Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Title IX Insider. Today we have the Clery Center joining us. We have Laura Egan, who is their Deputy Executive Director, and she will be here just to discuss and describe the Hazing Act, the Clery Act, and then all things that the Clery Center is doing to help serve and better inform campuses and schools around the country. And so I'm very excited and delighted to have you here with us, Laura. Would you like to just introduce yourself and share a little bit about what you do there at the Clery Center?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Sandy. It's so great to be here and to speak with you this morning. But yes, my name is Laura, Deputy Executive Director at Clery Center, and I really support overseeing our cross-departmental work at Clery Center. I've been here for 10 and a half years and have a background in K-12 school counseling and then higher education administration in both residence life and student conduct roles before coming to Clery Center. And I've been a large contributor of our programmatic offerings for the time I've been here, and just recently moved into this deputy executive director position at the end of the year, last year. And so now I'm just working to oversee our outgoing programs or outward facing programs, as well as supporting overall organizational health and culture with our fairly new executive director. Bob Alig is our executive director, and he began last June. So a little bit of leadership transition at Clery over the past few months, but really looking forward to a fresh year right now with all of our work.
And so, when you describe your work, one of the big areas that I know has really impacted the Clary Center, because you all were the biggest advocates, I would say, for the Hazing Act to be implemented and adopted and to pass through. Would you like to share a little bit about what you all experienced, or how has it been since it has passed?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. So yes, the Clery Act was most recently amended by the passage of the Stop Campus Hazing Act, which was passed at the end of 2024, December 23rd, 2024. And getting that legislation passed was a labor of love for our organization for at least 10 years. Our board members, Gary and Julie Diversley, who joined our board around 2014 or 2015, they tragically lost their son to hazing when he was a college freshman at Rider University in New Jersey. And as part of their settlement with the institution, they joined our board and donated funding to us to work towards developing hazing education, which we did develop in the form of this free video that is still available for folks, called We Don't Haze, on our website. And they were always interested in supporting any sort of advocacy to heighten awareness of hazing and to further prevent it from occurring and obviously from causing more harm.
Mhm.
And so Clery Center partnered with the organization Stop Hazing for the past few years, which is the leading researcher of hazing prevention and occurrence in our country. And that organization is led by Dr. Elizabeth Allen from the University of Maine. And so together with a bunch of parents, ultimately, a coalition was formed to advocate for legislation that would add hazing as a Clery Act reportable crime, in addition to some prevention and response requirements for the act of hazing. And so the parents that have been impacted by hazing have really had such a difficult world to navigate because they have lost a child, and sometimes they haven't lost a child. Their child is still alive, but has experienced extreme emotional or psychological distress. Many of the parents we collaborated with, though, did tragically lose a child, and they were working to find the best solution to make sure that hazing is not a standard by which people are defining their own connection to an organization, and that there is room for membership organizations to exist, for feelings of unity and group identification to exist without harm. And one mechanism by which that could hopefully happen is to have a more streamlined, consolidated way to track and report out on reports of hazing, as well as disciplinary findings of hazing cases on campuses. So the way we describe the components of the Stop Campus Hazing Act are broken down into three categories. Um, The first is that hazing has been added as a Clery Act crime category. So it is a reportable category that campuses need to report statistics out for instances of hazing that have occurred within their Clery Act geography that were reported to a campus security authority, just like any other Clery Act statistic. Campuses are also now required to offer prevention programming specifically about hazing prevention to students, staff, and faculty across campus. And then campuses are also required to publish a campus hazing transparency report. And this is one of the most unique aspects of the Stop Campus Hazing Act because the Clery Act is usually not focused on outcomes. It's all about initial reported information. So this is the first time that there's ever been a requirement around disclosing outcomes. But what it asks for is for all findings of recognized student organizations that are found responsible for violating the institution's hazing policy to be documented and communicated outwardly to the public, basically. So twice a year, institutions now must publish this transparency report that has that information within it. And we know that's a brand new thing, but some campuses were already doing it.
Amazing. That was probably one of my most favorite parts of the Hazing Act. And I
Mm,
mean, I created a video myself that we released through Title IX Consulting Group's YouTube channel.
mm,
Um, and it did go over and describe, I go through and describe each of the primary segments that campuses need to implement by when, what to do exactly. And having that CHTR, I think, is just so critically important. And I love the accountability that schools have with it. Because
mm,
as you said before, it was not really about outcomes. And whenever there's an ability to have accountability for campuses, I think it's critical
mhm,
because there's such a lack of accountability of campuses around the country. And that's when
mm,
we begin to see that things get missed and dropped, and
mm,
implementation of laws like this don't necessarily happen. Um,
mm.
so I'm curious, what has it been like to discuss these things with campuses around the country? How have they been reacting to the changes? I'm sure you're seeing a lot of the campuses that approach you that want to make the changes. So they're asking like, what do we do? What are our next steps? Has there been any pushback that you've seen?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. I think overall, there were many states that already defined hazing for themselves, but there was a fewer number that actually counted it as a crime or that had additional education or prevention requirements or disclosure requirements, like what the Stop Campus Hazing Act required of campuses. So I don't think there is from everyone a dismissal of the importance of addressing hazing and its persistence as a violent culture that persists on college campuses. I do think for some folks, it can sometimes feel like another thing to monitor and track and now revamp all of your training and education on. And now you have to provide prevention programming for the entire campus on this very specific thing for which there really isn't a lot of existing resources right now. So we're at that pinch point when you have a new set of requirements coming out and it feels like a big hill to climb as opposed to the relief of seeing the impact of those things put into place. And I think that's real. Everybody is stretched very thin right now, particularly in higher education. It can feel like the Department of Education or lawmakers are um, willfully ignorant to how much work campus folks are doing, and they're just adding on more things without thinking through how this would be implemented. And I can assure you that at least from our perspective, we were consulted a lot, as were so many other organizations and parents for the language and requirements of this legislation to try to make it feel purposeful and achievable. And even with that, I think it can be overwhelming. So I think there's that. I also have experienced many folks that are really excited about the prevention requirement. And similarly to what you said, having some standardization around the sharing of information about findings outwardly. There were many campuses. I mean, I guess it's important to say there is not another federal requirement that says that you need to disclose any findings of conduct proceedings at your institution. This is the only federal requirement that you disclose outcomes of conduct proceedings, and it happens to be tied to hazing outcomes. Many campuses choose to provide some sort of a like end of year report with, unidentifiable information about numbers of violations that were coded, numbers of people found responsible for certain violations, what typical sanctions were. So there is an attempt at that kind of transparency, but it's not required. So it is a unique opportunity to get really helpful information about like two layers of accountability with a campus, because the initial reporting of the incident with the Clery Act statistic element is capturing one piece of that transparency. And then the outcomes of a disciplinary process are the response effort to that initial report, potentially. And so there's like another element of disclosure that needs to happen on the other side of that. So I know many folks on campuses are like, this is hard. This is a lot more extra work. It's a lot more collaboration we need to do right now. And also, I'm grateful that we have an excuse to leverage to say we need to be open about what our process is. It enables, um, internal mechanisms for consistency to be advocated for and upheld. So, I mean, all of it is pushing for obviously a reduction of harm, but also to increase equity for people that are moving through these processes, for survivors to be able to have and believe in the ability of their campus to hold folks accountable for harm that they perpetuate. So, or perpetuate, yes. So I think that that's really just, it's a helpful road to be starting to walk down right now.
And I would add on transparency too, because of that transparent aspect where you're not only stating something happened, they were found responsible, but you're also including the sanctions, the consequences that are being placed onto those specific crimes when something is found, if a group or individual is found responsible.
Yeah,
So I think
absolutely.
that's amazing. And as you stated so perfectly, there is no other crime. There is no other Clery Act behavior where we actually have to place on a public record who was found responsible and what were the sanctions.
Hmm.
And so perhaps this could be the first step towards getting us there, because aside from the annual security report that provides you that unidentifiable information of, how many numbers of dating violence, domestic violence, now hazing, sexual violence categories such as rape are listed there, sometimes fondling as well, or actually always fondling. We have all of these different areas in stalking as well, but you don't know exactly what the sanctions were,
Hmm.
and you don't know if they were found responsible, not responsible. It's just what was reported and what you know as a campus actually falls into these categories.
Right.
Um, and so I think the Hazing Act really does a remarkable job of kind of setting the stage for something new for campuses.
Yeah, potentially for sure.
hmm Um, and you talked about prevention. I am curious about what types of things are you and the Clery Center discussing and describing as prevention steps or things to do for campuses to lighten their load to say, hey, you're already doing something here. Why don't we just tack on hazing? Or
Mm.
what types of new prevention programming can be included?
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a great question. I think this was a little bit of a catch-22 for us. That was an interesting uh, brain exercise, but so this is really echoing a lot of the talking points of Stop Hazing themselves, because they really are pioneers in this area of researching the prevalence of hazing and determining what would be the most effective strategies to prevent it. But what they know is that there is not a lot of research informed prevention strategies specifically for hazing that exist right now. So they knew that if there was a requirement that campuses had to start engaging and utilizing research-informed prevention programming, there would be a more of an incentive for campuses to either evaluate the effectiveness of their own training or for other folks to also research and develop prevention programming that is not only research informed, but could even be the higher standard of evidence-based effective prevention strategies for application for hazing on a campus. And with that goal in mind, that is why the language in the law is to have research-informed prevention programs, which is not necessarily the same level of intensity as an evidence-based program, but it is certainly working in that direction. It has a demonstrated positive impact on change, and that has been tested. So right now, there's only 2 programs in the country that are considered research-informed prevention programs for hazing. One of them happens to be utilizing the We Don't Haze video that Clery Center has produced, along with our accompanying guide, that because it has been tested with groups and shown to actually influence behavior change, thought change around what hazing is and how you respond to it. Another program that was developed with Cornell is similar. And it's a video program that folks use in group settings. There is an accompanying learning guide and discussion guide that leads viewers through activities where they discuss what they observed and learned. And there have been measured success stories there with the pre and post learning that happens. Both of those resources can be found on Stop Hazing's website. Obviously, We Don't Haze can be found through Clery Center. And just one other piece I would mention here is as that Stop Hazing has a very lovely blog that we refer to a lot. There's a whole blog on what the distinctions are between evidence-based or research-informed programming and then other standards as well, and what you need to have in order to say that your prevention program meets XYZ standard. So right now, what we are encouraging many campuses to do is, one, identify and audit essentially what you already have in place. You likely have some form of bystander intervention training on some level because of the pre-existing requirements for dating and domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. And there is no limit to the application of those strategies to other types of violence. So one way that you can have a research-informed prevention program is if you apply your bystander intervention strategies specifically to folks around the concept of hazing, and you evaluate the success of doing that. And what do people learn after attending that session? What are your rates of reports of crime? What are your rates of instances of people reporting and identifying and interrupting that kind of behavior? So that's one strategy that we encourage frequently. Another thing to just consider is right now, because now you have like multiple prevention requirements, it's probably useful to sit down and just get a lay of the land of how many different departments or divisions on your campus address hazing in general and prevention of violent crime or gender-based crime in general. One of my favorite stories that I relay I was just sitting in a session at NASPA Strategies last January and heard a campus describe how when they learned about these new regulations or, a new statute coming out, and they knew that there were some requirements that were coming down the pike about prevention, they chatted on campus and realized that the band and athletics and Greek were all teaching on hazing. And they were all using slightly different language, slightly different scenarios, different strategies. And so coming together to develop a campus-wide hazing prevention strategy not only streamlined efforts, but it helped to reinforce them. Because if you have one standard tagline, message, recommendations for best practices or strategies that you use over and over again, your staff is going to be more familiar with teaching it. You might have students that are participating in multiple activities, so they're going to get dosage of that. And just in general, your social awareness campaigns and media campaigns will be universally recognized. And so just that kind of repetition of message is really valuable. And then you're like helping yourselves in the end by not having to reteach things in different ways because you're in a different department. So for me, it was just an illuminating moment of how siloed higher ed can be and how important it is to recognize those silos, look across the aisle, and try to take advantage of these opportunities to leverage your internal strengths to meet a new requirement that then you might be able to use for greater exploration moving forward.
That's a wonderful reminder. So thank you for sharing that story. I think that's really wonderful. Um, I have a quick question regarding K through 12. I know you mentioned a K through 12 background within your background, and curious, I know that the Clery Act is all about higher education. Curious if there have been any conversations or discussion about getting some of these topics over to the K through 12 side.
Yeah, not to my knowledge under Clery. Thankfully, of course, Title IX extends to K to 12, but yes, Clery does not at this point in time. Clery was so developed from the lens of standardizing the way campus public safety and police departments communicate. And since that isn't really a primary function of a primary school or a K-12 environment right now, I don't think it was ever conceptualized for that age group. Obviously, in the current climate, there has been an increase in activity in K-12 environments that is not uncommon on college campuses when we're talking about mass casualty events and things like that. But no, there is no discussion right now to extend the Clery Act to K-12.
Okay. I'm always curious about that, so I had to ask.
Yeah, no, great question. Great question.
Can you share a little bit about the funding surrounding the Clery Act and what exactly campuses and schools are required to do at this point and how the changes in the federal government might be impacting everything?
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So, any campus that receives Title IV funding is required to fully comply with all aspects of the Clery Act. The Clery Act is sometimes referred to as, an unfunded mandate in that it doesn't provide funding in and of itself, but it is tied to federal funding. So in that way, you can make an argument that there is funding tied to it in some capacity. The ultimate penalty for non-compliance with the Clery Act could be loss of your federal funding, although that has not yet happened as an outcome. Most campuses that are found out of compliance are fined. But right now, campuses are still required to fully comply with the Clery Act. While there might be or have been some shifts in responsibilities of folks at the Department of Education, there is still responsibility for ensuring enforcement of the Clery Act within what exists of the Department of Education. That has not changed yet. And the Clery Act is still a law that must be adhered to. So campuses are still required to publish an annual security report each year by October 1st that has the 3 previous calendar years worth of Clery crime statistics and its statements of policy within it. The most recent amendments to the Clery Act came with the passage of the Stop Campus Hazing Act, so that requires the new reporting crime category of hazing, new policy statements in the ASR regarding reporting of hazing, investigating hazing, and then holding prevention programs. So the Clery Act is still alive and well. Campuses are still required to adhere to it. And we are still here as a support to provide technical assistance as folks need it that are members of our organization. Westat still exists as a federal contractor. They run the help desk and also provide free technical assistance to campuses. So yeah, that is all still happening despite some significant shifts in the organization of the Department of Education.
Okay, thank you for answering that. So I think for today, this is going to wrap up our podcast. Just thank you again for joining us and giving us all this insight and information, which is going to be very helpful to campuses around the country, especially as they are pushing forward this new year and getting ready for what is to come, what they have to have in place and what they need to have ready to go in October to submit for their ASRs as well. Um, do you have any last words or anything that's coming up for trainings from the Clery Center that you would like to share?
Oh my gosh, yes, I'd love to. We have our first in-person training of the year at the University of Central Florida in the second week of March, and registration is currently open but closes at the end of February. So please register now to get your spot. And we are always promoting our individual and institutional membership programs. Please visit our website for more information, but those are the ways that we can most acutely support you as you navigate Clery compliance. So check us out for those resources.
Great. Well, Laura, thank you so much. We'll be sure to include your resources also on our website. We are finalizing our development of our resource page, so we're going to be including information and resources for campuses there too. So we'll be sure to include the Hazing Act and all of those prevention tools that you mentioned as well. So thank you again, and everyone will see you at the next one. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Dr. Sandi.